All right, so my guest today, Ashley J. Roberts, awesome friend, definitely a longtime mentor and colleague, and we'll definitely be talking about his all-time world record that he held in powerlifting, and so many amazing things. He truly is the king of transformation, in my opinion, going through transformation in so many aspects, and I can't wait for you guys to hear his story. So we're just going to get right into it. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here and excited to hopefully share some things with the audience that maybe gives them a shift on perspective and helps motivate them or encourage them or just move one step forward from where they are today.
Yeah, no, they definitely will take away just a ton of stuff. So first, I think it'd just be powerful to just share your story, because there's so many aspects of it that will really resonate with people along their journey. So love to hear.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but really it all started when I was a kid living in England, and, we had four channels on TV. That was it. Back in the day when you had to get up and walk over to the TV to change the channel. And I'm not that old, and that just shows how fast things are changing, but that was the heyday of the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. And I had some cousins who lived in America and had come over and introduced me to basketball. And then that was going on, and I was able to watch those games. And so I became fascinated, with the sport of basketball, with the American lifestyle. And MTV Cribs was a TV show that I had watched. It basically brainwashed me into thinking that if I could become a professional athlete, that I could have all these things that make someone happy: cars, houses, money, all of those things. And so that began the journey. And then basketball brought me to America in high school. I was able to play 1 year, ended up being a 3-sport athlete. But my senior year actually was banned from playing high school sports because there's a ruling basically that you can only play 1 year as a foreign exchange student. We tried to get around that. I got my parents' side legal guardianship, all of that. The school board recognized me for schooling, so that I didn't have to pay, tuition, out of country tuition or whatever they charged. But the sports body wouldn't recognize that, so I didn't get to play. So I would practice with the teams. I'd be there coaching on the sidelines for the games, but I wasn't allowed to play. And so that led me into being competitive. I needed an outlet for that, and that was where I found powerlifting. Actually, we had a bowling team too that we did pretty good with it, which is a lot of fun. But powerlifting is really where my outlet was, which led to this decade-long journey of me chasing the world record to become the absolute best. And, there was a lot of highs and lows with that, but essentially I sacrificed everything in order to achieve that goal, and unfortunately, for me, there was a lot of people in my life who, were passing away, having really serious health issues, people who were in the sport who were older than me. And I just saw the writing on the wall, said, this is my direction. And I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, and, I've got to get out. And so, a lot of people think I just left on the top, one of those drop the mic moments, I've made it, I'm peace out. But the reality was I was terrified. I was going to die. And so, I moved out to California, to San Diego, because essentially I had to remove myself from the environment. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those things, but remove myself from the environment so I could allow myself to figure out what's next. And that led me into competitive bodybuilding. And although I physically had an amazing transformation on the outside, on the inside, my body was still going through a lot. And I was probably just as unhealthy competing on a bodybuilding stage over 100 pounds and lost weight that I was when I was, 320 pounds. And that kind of led me down a path of what the hell am I doing here? Is this journey of competition really healthy? And what is health? And trying to figure out what is health in terms of physically, mentally, emotionally, what is health? And that just spiraled me on this deep personal, journey of inner work and figuring out who I am. And then, coming out the other side and being okay, like health is longevity, and what does that look like, and how does that play into things? And so I feel like that's a never ending journey that I'll constantly be going deeper down the rabbit hole. But ultimately, I had birth of my daughter earlier this year, shifts even more perspective, but it changes the way you look at things. And I think that when it comes to transformation, that's really what it is. It's just these, decisions you make, and then the outcomes of those decisions. And so it's really interesting because everything can change in a moment. And that's kind of been my life, has been these incredible achievements, so to speak. And then just a complete change of direction. And there's definitely some things that I do that I think lend to the success when I choose to do that. So, but that's essentially my story in a nutshell in terms of transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one that is not normal. I mean, you don't hear of most people that can do that extreme of transformations to become world's strongest lifter, and then turn around, drop 100 pounds, bodybuilder, and then turn around and realize got some issues with the body that still needs to go through, and then transform. Probably, I'm sure you could agree, the biggest transformation is becoming a dad, like you mentioned. So you talked about like hitting these pivot moments and then just making the shift. And it sounds like just like a snap decision. Like, I saw people dying and drop the mic and go. So like, where does your mind go in those moments, and how does somebody tap into that? If like they're all of a sudden they're sitting on the couch and they're realizing like, I am over 100 pounds overweight, or, like I haven't been working out, like how do they get that shift in there? Because it sounds like motivation for you is oftentimes coming from a place of fear or something other than just like seeing a meme on social media and then all of a sudden we have the bug.
Yeah. I would say what's interesting, and I think most people can relate, is that when we're comfortable, it's very difficult to make change, right? And so we have desires, we have wants, like we have things that we believe that we truly want, but the reality is that the risk to reward ratio is just not tipped in the favor where it's going to make us make it a transition. And for me, and on the business side, obviously, for those that don't know, very advanced in marketing and things like that. And so psychology and human psychology plays a big part into that. And the reason I share that is because ultimately, what we found in testing and things like that in marketing is that people are very rarely make change when they're sold on a new heaven. But they definitely make change when they're sold on this concept of going to hell. And, if churches preached of this greater land, they would get less conversion than they preach that you're going to end up in a burning pit of fire with all the things that you're scared of. What that translates into is this need when I personally, for me, when I make decisions, that I have to create this fork in the road reality of where the direction can go. And I have to understand that where I am right now, I'm heading on that path. So I'll like, for example, when I decided that it was time to get out of powerlifting, there's a lot of decisions that go into that, teammates and letting people down and all those different things. But ultimately it was this fork in the road. And it was like, I'm on this path to essentially slow suicide, right? Or I could start a new journey and head in a different direction. And when I make that decision, it's like, okay, what's the major turning point that is going to shift that? And typically, it's environment for me, right? And it's about being in the right place, surrounded by the right people. Because if I was an alcoholic or if I was a drug addict, right, and I continue to hang out with alcoholics and drug addicts, chances of me getting clean are pretty slim to none, just regardless of my desire. But if I all of a sudden go to NA or go to AA or go to a support group of people who are all trying to achieve the same thing, my chances increase, right? And so it's literally a point where I see it, and because of the understanding of the body and those kind of things, I see it as like little knocks on the door, and they just get louder and louder and louder. And so over time, what I've learned is that when I hear that whisper, to start paying attention early, right? Because I've made the mistake in the past where I've just ignored it, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it led to a divorce, and it led to all these different things because I ignored the voice. I ignored the whisper, right? In the human body, we see it with people training. They'll start to get a nagging injury in their knee and their shoulder. And over time, it will lead to something greater. In the end, something snapping, that forces them into complete rest, into complete recovery, because their body is just, yelling at them, but they're not listening. And so because of that, what I've done is when I start to hear those whispers, I really go, okay, I got to figure out here what needs to happen, what needs to change. And I kind of future pace into the worst of it, and then future pace into the best of it. And I say, I got to make a decision. And what's that first decision I have to make? And for me, it's always environment. It's being in the right place around the right people. That might mean hiring a coach. It might be, in my case, transporting myself to a completely different state. When I started bodybuilding, I actually used to drive home, and I'd go past, Krispy Kreme donuts. So that meant I just had to change my route on the way home so that I wasn't, because willpower, if I'm relying on willpower, well, there's a good chance that I'm going to cave at some point, right? Like I can maybe make it, 3, 4, 5 times past that, not think of it. And then that one day where I'm, where my food's low, my calories are low, all of a sudden, I just go through the drive-through, get a half dozen donuts, even a dozen donuts, so it's about making that decision. For me, it is the environment and where I'm at, and how does that play into these thoughts and these patterns. And to me, every time I change the environment, it literally starts to change things. And so it can be applied on the macro level to grander scheme of things. It can be applied on the micro level, just from, if you wake up and you do a certain routine, like, switch sides of the bed with your partner and get up on the other side of bed and do a different routine. Like, it's about creating these shifts that like disrupt your current operating system, so to speak. And if you think of it like that, with this operating system that's running on outdated programs that are buggy and shitty, and we're trying to update. But if we keep allowing those old programs to run, we just get sucked back down. So that's really, like, for me, when it comes to a shift, you got to go all the way back first, and eventually, hopefully you get to the spirit level where you live it. Right. And that's the kind of, there's knowing, right? There's doing, and there's living and being, so to speak. And those are the 3 kind of phases. First, you have to have the knowledge. You have to have the awareness. You have to recognize it. You have to tell the truth. You have to say, like for real, what's going on. And then you have to practice and understand you're going to fuck up. You're going to fail. You're going to screw up. You're going to go up and down. Like, you're going to make bad choices. You're probably going to screw up, and not be attached to that. Right. Like, and so when it happens, oh, okay. Like, how do I get back on track? And then the last thing is it just becomes who you are. And that's when you can actually go back into those old environments. And, I could go back to Westside Barbell, which is where I trained when I was powerlifting in Columbus, Ohio. I could go back there, and I'm not going to suddenly want to be 380 pounds again and, start, competing. So that's kind of like the where you get to in the end. But a lot of people make the mistake of knowing and then trying to be back in those environments, saying, well, I know better. And then they end up, guilt and shame and all these negative things, because they're like, I know this, why don't I just do it? And so that's kind of that piece for me that a lot of people miss is sometimes you have to avoid at all costs. You have to remove yourself from the environment. You have to build a support team that is different than what you had before. And it could mean, cutting cords, friends, locations, those kind of things. And I think a lot of people when they start breaking it down, they're just not willing to do that. It's too painful to do that, to go through. And I think that it's unfortunate because I think their reality and and this is, if you don't know what's on the other side, if you don't know what it truly is like, it's very difficult, right? Like, you have a perception, you have a thought process, you have this idea, but you don't truly know. And without truly knowing, it's very difficult to be attracted to it, because you're going to default to what you know. So it takes some extreme measures for sure. But it really comes down to that decision. Like, have you really had enough? For me, death was a stark reality. It wasn't something that was possible. It wasn't something that's a maybe. It was like people are dropping like flies, and I'm probably more unhealthy than them, you know, and being like, that's not how I want to live my life out. So, but it takes, you gotta reach out for help, and you gotta put yourself in the right place. So, you know, for me, that's what it is. It's that environment, it's that first level. And then, you know, environment, and then essentially like what causes the issues, right? Like what like is your trigger, so to speak, that like makes you default to the behavior that you don't want. And then figuring out what's the treatment for that? Like, what's the opposite of that? Or what's what I need to do? Right. Because, it's over, like it's saying you want to get in, then we'll just talk about body transformation, saying you want to get in shape, but not having any idea, like, first of all, what's making you not be in shape. And secondly, what you need to do to get in shape. You know, you're kind of, that's just, oh, that sounds great. But so it's about this experiment and figuring it out and figuring it out and being willing to like say, okay, like this is a journey. And on this journey, and that's, I love the hero's journey. I know you're familiar with that, but it's like, I'm on this journey and there's going to be battles, and I'm going to have to figure things out, and I'm going to have to learn how to overcome. And what's interesting is even when you think you've mastered everything, something will come up, and it will reveal something to you like, oh, okay, like in this situation, I don't have my shit together. And it's like going back. And so it's just this, I've learned to appreciate it as a beautiful dance and just see it as this ebb and flow versus, you know, a negative or a positive. And I think that helps a lot, but it really just, it comes down to understanding like, and getting real and making it a reality. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where the fact is we're all going to die and we don't know our timeline. And so you have to choose, like, do you want to continue this way and kind of surrender and just say, this is what it is? Or do you want to listen to that voice? And my guess is that anyone who's listening is there is this voice, there is this sound, there is this thing, and you're feeling called to something, and it gets louder and louder and louder. At some point I have to believe that will just disappear and, you know, you'd surrender. But, if you're at that place right now where you know you need to make a shift, you need to make a transition, you know, look at it like this: what else you got to lose? You know, if you know, and if you can go down that path and say, if I continue like this, like, oh, this is how it's going to be, like, probably don't want to go that direction, right? And that's, I think most people aren't looking that, and yeah, I think that really, really helps is to map that out and go, shit, okay, like, what's the heaven? What's the hell? All right, I definitely don't want to be towards hell. So even if I get closer to heaven, but it's not heaven, it's better than fucking hell, right?
Man, I love that. Like so much impactful stuff in there. I mean, people are going to have to go back and re-listen to that one for sure. And just the whole concept environment is so huge. And that's what I realized. So for those that don't know, I actually started working with Ashley. He was one of my mentors for quite a long time, because he has been the backbone to so many businesses, especially in the fitness and health space. And I mean, like, his touch and reach, like, dude, you've touched so many lives and helped so many people transform their bodies and gain control, just indirectly by helping these businesses provide quality information and resources to the industry. And so that's where I sought out AJ, and the environment piece was massive. And just overcoming some of the obstacles that I know that I was facing with trying to figure out what I needed to do to transform, to be able to deliver the right material, the right message. And it was that calling, that whisper that was growing and growing. And one of the most powerful things that I haven't seen many other coaches do or dabble in at all, but you really focused on personality and identity. And I know you were kind of talking about pieces in there, and it just triggered that memory. And like, we even used some personality tests to help, and it just exposed where I was just dumping so much wasted energy into my weaknesses instead of focusing on strengths. And I know that's been a reason that I've been able to do some of the things I've done, and I've been able to use that with clients. And so because you're kind of the master of that, and behavioral psych plays such a huge role, just love your insights on what people need to know about themselves and how they can figure out more about their personalities, and they're just who they are now to become who they want to become. Like, how does that play a role?
So I think it's easier if you try to understand, like think of your brain in this way, that there's you who's experiencing everything, and then there's you who's observing everything, and then there's you who's just completely unaware, right? So if we look at that as if we look at ourselves as three separate entities, right? In religion, they call it the Father, the Spirit, the Holy Ghost. In consciousness, it'd be the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious, right? So this isn't a concept. It's not new. I didn't make this up. This is in all different spiritualities, religions, everything, right? It's this concept of that we're not one, we're three. And if you can start to, if environment is, say, the first level, like the second level is understanding like how you operate, right? Your behaviors, and the way you operate. Most people just operate on default, right? There's not a conscious thought about how they're going to respond or react, or what they're going to do if this happens. And so your behaviors, I think, like that's where the awareness comes in, right? Like what are my behaviors when I'm hungry? How do I act? When I'm angry, how do I act? Right? When I'm lonely, how do I act? Right? When I'm tired, what happens? And understanding who you are, what do you like in the mornings? What do you like midday? What do you like in the afternoons? Like, what are your default behaviors? What do you go to? Right? If you should be meditating, but instead you're masturbating, like what's causing that? Right? If you should be sleeping, but instead you're taking a pill to stay awake, or drinking energy drinks to go out, like why is that? Right? Like what is the behavior there, and what's your current operating system? Because to me, once you can start to see that, then you can say, oh, okay, like who would I have to be in order to show up as a different person? What are the behaviors of the successful, so to speak? And this is where you have to be careful who you listen to, because like they might say something, but like ultimately the life they have isn't really what you want. And so you have to be careful. But for example, there's research out there that says that like most successful CEOs get up at 5 a.m. Right? So if you're someone who wants to be successful and you're a CEO, like you might experiment at least with getting up at 5 a.m. if you currently get up at, say, 8 a.m. Right? So it's like these behaviors you can start to recognize and say, okay, are these behaviors that people, that the majority of the people who I want to be like, right, operate with? Majority of people who are healthy, like do this or do that or work out this minimum. And, so you can look at those certain behaviors. Then it goes down to really like your abilities, right? Like, what are you actually capable of? What can you do? Because there might be things you can't do, right? And you have to understand, like, what are your limitations? And you mentioned it, strengths and weaknesses, right? Physically, we can work on our weaknesses. If we're strong on one lift but weak on another, we can get stronger. But in terms of like life, like if you're not the most emotional person, like, okay, you could work on that, or you could figure out, okay, what does that look like, and how does that mean, and what do I have to be aware of when I'm interacting with somebody else and doing those kind of things. So you start to like figure out, well, who the fuck am I right now, right? And then like, who is it that I have to become? And then what's the gap there? And that's what we're always looking at, is the gap between where we are and where we have to become. The thing is that oftentimes, and we have to be careful that we don't create this, I'm so far away from where I need to be, I'm a piece of shit. Like, we can't have judgment for who we are. And that's where this concept of be here now, live in the moment, accept everything fully, is where, like, to get where you want to go and not be who you are, it's just simply a choice. The gap really doesn't exist, right? And so, for example, go back to the getting up at 5 a.m. If I get up at 8 a.m., literally all I have to do is get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Boom. I have now done the exact thing that I was supposed to do, right? It's not this big thing of, okay, well, do I need to set my alarm back by 5 minutes? Or like, do I do this over? Like, it's just a decision. You make a shift. Some things will take longer. For example, if you say, okay, I have, 50 pounds of body fat on me that I need to lose. Tomorrow, you're not going to wake up 50 pounds lighter, but the next meal you put in to your body, you know, does it lead towards the habit that someone who's 50 pounds lighter has? So the behaviors and then what your ability to control it are super important. But none of that really matters if like your beliefs are broken, right? And Vishen Lakhiani, he has a great book, Code of Excellence, I think it's called, but he labels these as like rules, and these are like bullshit rules, and these are like belief systems that you have because of whatever you've been through. And they're not real. They're just, you know, created by either the society, the environment, by parents, by friends, by, you know, all these different things. And so this belief system, your current belief system, like you have to be willing to say, okay, like I need to reevaluate this. Why do I believe this thing? And so, you know, if you believe you're a person that cannot be successful, why is that? Where did that come from? You know, for me, I grew up and, you know, when I did something and I had success, I continued doing it. The things I didn't have success as, I didn't do. So the reason I was playing basketball was because when I tried to play soccer, like I wasn't very great at it, right? And so I didn't get good feedback from that. Basketball got good feedback. Some people, though, don't ever get that. You know, they'll be on a team that's a losing team, and they'll get this mentality that I'm a loser. Well, are you a loser? Or like, and what does that mean to be a loser? You know? And so it's about redefining and reshaping those beliefs, because ultimately they're what you've attached your identity to. And for me, you know, what happened was, you know, basketball player, powerlifter, bodybuilder, right? These are all identities that I easily attach myself to. And what I had to do is start to strip away that and be like, well, who the fuck am I? Like as a human, who am I? Like not as this perception of this persona, like not as this title that I've put on myself, you know, not as this, you know, entrepreneur or, you know, behind the scenes expert that helps all these influencers grow. But who am I? Like, what do I believe? Like, and when you start looking at that, like you often find you've been told your whole life what to be, how to act, what to do, what to dress like, and you start to pull it away. And this is where it's really hard, is really, you're not learning anything new. You're unlearning all the things that you've been layered on. And you go, okay, like if I'm not this, powerful. If I'm not this, then what am I? If I'm not this, then what am I? And if you come back to like, you know, oh, like I'm a beacon of light, or I'm a source of love, or like you go, okay, like now you can start to look at it and think. And ultimately when you get to that point, that's when you start to get to know, like you get to know who you are. And when you get to know who you are, you get to ultimately understand spirituality and like something greater than you, right? Because you were created. And so this search for meaning, this search for understanding really is all internal. And that's the true path to spirituality, like the true path to something greater. It's not outside of you. And all the spiritual texts support that. You know, where this showed up, I had a friend who is doing a book launch, releasing their book, and I didn't resonate with that message. But I found myself, because they're a friend, wanting to make a post or share, telling people to hey, you should grab this book. It's a great book. Truth is, I haven't read the book. I've just seen, you know, different posts and different things like this. But the part of me that wanted recognition from him, the part of me wants to get, you know, validation that I'm a good friend and that, like, you know, hey, I'm here, see me. Like that part of me, that neediness, like, you know, it was this desire to like try to do something to show him that, hey, I've got your back, right? And it comes from this lack of self-confidence, this lack of self-love, this, you know, needing something from somebody else to fill my tank up. And, you know, I got to see that because I was really torn on it. And I was like, wait a minute, like if I'm torn, why would I do this? You know, what would cause me to do that? And I think that that's the beautiful thing is like, as we go down this path of understanding, you know, our operating system, our behaviors, our, you know, our strengths and weaknesses, you know, what our belief and thought patterns are, you know, who we identify ourselves as, we can start to say like, oh, like, am I showing up as that person, or am I showing up as the person I want to be, or the person I know I truly am, which is a better way to do it. Like ultimately the person we want to be is usually who we truly are. What we're trying to do is just to get rid of all of this other stuff we've layered on. And so, the events that happen in our life seem perfectly aligned to what we need at that moment in order to like move one step forward. And if we look at it as a game, every time we choose not to learn from something, it seems like we repeat that lesson, right? It's like repeating the level. You get eaten up by the plant, and you got to repeat the level, like it's like an extra life. But some people seem to be repeating that year after year after year after year. And I don't know if they're aware of it, if they're not aware of it. But ultimately that's kind of, for me, it's like, if you're repeating that same thing over and over and over, like you're missing the lesson here. And that's what you need to figure out in order to get to that true transformation on the other side.
Man, that's so good. So good. So before I ask my last question, where can people find you if they need business advice or health advice or all the multitude of things that you and your companies all do? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest is just going to be add me on social media, Instagram.com AJ Roberts and Facebook.com AJ Roberts. I'm not a super poster by any means, because I kind of, my attention is somewhere else most of the time. But I am responsive. So if someone, messages me there or whatever, and that always has, the different links to different things I'm up to and things I'm doing. So that's probably the one thing that'll stay consistent, that's easiest for people to connect with me. Perfect.
Yeah, it's true. You're such a good family man. You're either doing that or helping run multiple businesses, or you're on stage speaking to somewhere all the time. So that's cool. So last question. What do you feel like it truly means to transform?
I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's about being. A lot of people can gain the knowledge. And a lot of people can read a book or watch a video and gain the knowledge. And so they have this cooling and they gain the knowledge. But it's truly that a willingness to live the experience and to go through the doing and the ups and downs of that. And that's what I think most people are unwilling to do, because at the end of the day, the reality is that the world that they currently live in is not bad enough for them to want to transition to that other side. And so if there's something you want to achieve, if there's something you want to, change in your life, what it comes down to is you making even if it is okay, but it's making the current reality unacceptable. It doesn't mean, learning to hate the current reality. It doesn't mean to say that the current reality sucks. It just means to understand that this is not the best version of me. This is not the best version of my life. And therefore, I know that like I could go this direction. If I don't, what could happen? What's going to happen? Play that through and then get to that point, experience that, go through the ups and downs, find, so to speak, your demons and learn how to wrestle with them, defeat the dragon, so to speak. And if you're stuck on any of these concepts, just watch a lot of Disney movies. They pretty much cover all of this. And of course, I'm watching a lot more now that I have a daughter. But the reality is it's that like when you can be, and a real great example is this: if you can go to a restaurant that you go to Olive Garden that put their amazing breadsticks on the table, but you don't eat the bread, because you understand what it's going to do to your body. You understand the process that it goes through within the body. You understand how essentially it's poison to the body, right? And we don't have to go into that. But like now you're probably not going to eat that bread. But it's come from this awareness. It's come from this deep learning. It's come from all of the experience. So I heard this the other day and it made a lot of sense. I wish I remembered who I heard it from. I think it was a guy named Adi Shante. But he said, transformation is the hardest journey you'll ever take. And the reason most people don't take it is because it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. There is moments of sadness and misery. But the reality is that what lies on the other side is true happiness, true joy, right? And I think that that's really, for me, in all of the success I've had, right, it's this delayed gratification of and trusting that what's on the other side of all of this is something greater than I could ever imagine. And stepping into that. And I think that for me, you know, I've been lucky enough to essentially reach the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And the reality is that, like, you start to understand that it actually, the journey itself is what was magnificent. Like, what you get on the other side is just a reflection to appreciate that. And that is the true being of being able to say you've mastered that set of skills or that set of things. And it's very, very cool to be able to get there. But at the same time, you understand that there's something more, there's something greater, and that it is this like never ending journey. And for a moment I got distracted where it was like, okay, like I've done all this stuff. So should I just chill and sit back now? You know? And only to realize like, wow, like life is meant to be lived. It's meant to be experienced, you know? And so there's what's that next adventure. And maybe not everybody's like that. I don't know. Like, I don't understand things, but I feel like when you go back to our roots and you go back to our primal and the hunter gatherer and the explorer and all of that, like, I feel like humans are meant to move. And if we're not moving, that's when we're not happy. And that's when, you know, disease and, you know, mental illness and all these different things show up. And so for me, it's just, you just got to get people into momentum, and it's better to go forward than it is to go backwards. So that I'll finish on that.
Beautiful, man. Ashley, I appreciate it so much. So many incredible insights. And yeah, everyone definitely go back and listen to this one again. Take some notes for sure. You know, do your due diligence and follow him. So when he does post something, like you said, he doesn't post a ton, but when he does, it's profound. So again, Ashley, appreciate it very, very much. I know listeners are going to be very pleased with all the insights that they were able to take away.
My pleasure.
All right, my friends, thanks again for listening to another great episode. Now, I do have one request. If you know of someone that's got a amazing success story, or if you know of a transformational coach or transformation authority figure with insights and lessons that need to be shared, we'd love to talk to any of these people. There's a good chance we can have them on one of the next episodes, and they continue to help us all grow as we continue to unveil the truth of what it takes to truly transform. Last thing, love for you to head on over to iTunes and hit that 5-star review button. Helps to get this message out and continue to transform more lives. As always, my friends, Coach Joseph Hawthorne, peace be the journey.